Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leah Smalley. I'm the Assistant Director of Financial Aid Services at the Coordinating Board. Thank you so much for joining me for this June webcast. For today, I wanted to mention that we may have some extra folks on the line outside of financial aid because some of the topics that we're discussing today actually involve other departments at your institution. So I think that we'll have a variety of people on the call today. So if you've never joined one of my webcasts before, just wanted to give you a couple of reminders as we get started to, one, please mute any microphones that you have so that we can reduce background noise. Second off, this is being recorded, so please be mindful of that on any messages or things that you type in the chat box. And third is if you can wait till the end to type your questions, that way I can make sure and I address those at the end, and so that everyone can benefit from that. That being said, I did kind of reorganize the webcast this month so that I go over some general updates first. And then as we move through the presentation, if the topics that I'm going to be talking about maybe don't apply to you or you don't want to sit through the whole thing, you can choose to drop off. Now, I am always of the opinion all information is great and all learning is great. So, of course, I would love for everyone to stay to the very end. So I leave that to you, but we will go ahead and look through the agenda today, which is really structured around resources. So I wanted to go through some newer resources and some updates to resources. First and foremost, I'm just going to go through some reminders, training, and updates that are going on so that you can be aware of those and then also communicate those to your either customers or stakeholders or other staff members. Then I'm going to be going through some what I'm calling program guideline updates, and they're specific to 2 programs. And I actually have a special guest with me on the call today, and her name is Miss Vanessa Malo. And after I get done with this, I'll let her introduce herself. So she's going to be on the call with me today, so that way she can provide some additional information to you and answer questions if you have those. So I will let her do that in just a moment. And then last but not least, I have 2 resources. I only listed foster care, but I'll be talking about the foster care exemption fact sheet that we created and we just posted, and then also the educational aid exemption program. So I wanted to let you know about those resources. But before we get started, I wanted again to introduce Vanessa so that she can tell you what her role is at the coordinating board, and that way you know kind of who to reach out to if you have questions about the program that she oversees. So Vanessa, hopefully you're there. Can you give the group a little overview of your role and how you can support them?
Yes, thank you. Leah, can you hear me clearly?
If she's there.
Leah, can you hear me?
If you are there, Vanessa, I don't hear you. This is unfortunately how it happens with a remote session where we're all in different places. But that's okay. I'm going to move forward with the presentation, and then once she's available, she can chime in. And if we're having technical difficulties the entire time, then of course I have her contact information so that you can reach out to her directly. Okay, so getting started, I wanted to provide some reminders and updates. First and foremost, like I said, educational aid exemption. We were getting a lot of inquiries, and not only from students, but also from the schools asking about the application. And so we did release that yesterday. So that's now available on online, and also we have some FAQs, and I'm going to go through that towards the end of the presentation. Financial aid database cycle 2 is coming up very quickly. It'll be opening June 22nd. We will be sending out a notice with an updated manual and some other information, so keep an eye out for that. But you blink and bam, cycle 2 is here. Y'all didn't have to do the cycle 1, which was a really great relief from everything else going on right now. But just like that, it's already June, so be prepared. We're trying to get as much information out to you as possible, so stay tuned on that. The deadline for the tuition equalization grant engagement report was extended, but that deadline now is quickly approaching. So it's about 2 weeks away. June 30th is the deadline. So if you have not submitted your engagement report to the coordinating board, please, take note of that deadline so that you can send that in on time. The authority to transfer process for 1920 is still available until July 1st. So on my last webcast, I went through this process with the folks that joined. If you're not familiar with the authority to transfer process, please, I would recommend going back to review that webcast. But essentially, if you have Texas College Work Study or Work Study Mentorship funding that you are not going to be using for the year, you do have the ability to transfer that into one of the 3 state grant programs that you participate in. So it is there's a lot of steps to the process. So if you are going to be doing that, you need to start looking into that now by sending an inquiry to us to let us know so we can walk you through all the steps. Then lastly, I mentioned this on several of the webcasts so far, but we have still been getting inquiries on Net Price Calculator, which is hosted on the College for All Texans website. Each year, institutions have to provide us data, and normally we do that in May or June, but because of college student budgets and everything going on with the COVID pandemic, we had to extend that out. So we will be doing that later in the fall. So keep an eye out for that. But for those of you who were wondering or didn't hear that information, that's the reason why it's not being requested at this time like it normally is. Moving on to training, I think we talked about before that online loan reporting is coming soon. We're in the final testing phases, hopefully in the next few weeks, which means that I'm hoping by next webcast to be able to announce that, but I don't have a definitive date because, as you know, when you're testing and doing things, sometimes, last minute changes come up, but it is on the horizon. It is going to happen. And so I'm sure a lot of the schools that do the loan programs through the coordinating board are going to be very excited to use this new tool. So please stay tuned. I promise I'll get you some more information and we'll deliver training either through a webcast format or a dedicated training so that people can get familiar with the new loan reports. Next month's webcast is going to be July 14th. So please mark your calendar for that. I don't have the topics yet. I will send those out as soon as we have them available, or you can always check online under our webcast page and we'll post the topics there usually the week prior so that you can be on the lookout for if you're going to attend or not. So contacting us, I've gone through this for several months now on how to get a hold of us and to remind people about our phones. We do have dedicated toll-free numbers, but because the staff of the agency is working remotely, we don't have the phone lines operational at this point. We are working on some solutions, but right now we don't have that as an available resource. So instead, we've been encouraging people to send them through Contact Us, which is on all of our web pages. And when you click on it, you will need to select financial aid as the contact reason. If you don't select financial aid question in the drop down, it gets routed to other areas of the agency, and then it relies on that getting kind of filtered through to us. It can take a few days. So definitely please send them through Contact Us. We're doing our best to get through those. That obviously we're seeing an uptick in inquiries because of the phone lines being down, but we do have staff working on those daily. And then another note is that because of all the lack of phones, we're actually getting a lot of emails directly, but they appear to be the same ones that are going through Contact Us. So there's kind of a duplication going on. So I'm requesting that if you know anyone or if you're doing that you can just use the Contact Us. And the reason is, one, because there's a lot of people in and out of the office right now because of summer. And I just want to make sure that your inquiry gets to someone to resolve more quickly, because sometimes you'll have 2 different people answering you too, and then that can get confusing. So we're trying to funnel everything through the Contact Us so it's easy to track. And again, for time purposes, it's easier to get a response because we can delegate those out versus if someone's out of the office, they may not get your email timely. Lastly, this came out, you may start noticing that the domain name on our emails at the coordinating board are changing. They've changed. So previously they had thecb.state.text.us, and now they've been moved over to a simplified domain name, which is initiative of the commissioner, and he changed it to highered.texas.gov, which is much easier and much more modern of a domain. So if you see that, but then you see our old one, I wanted to make sure that you know that, so that you know that it is truly the coordinating board contacting you. So that did change about a week ago. All right, so moving on, let's talk about the new program guidelines that have come out and any updates, and then resources. So bilingual education program guidelines were just created. And if you're familiar with bilingual education, it only relates to 7 schools. And the reason is because this program is actually not written into the statute or into any administrative rules, but instead is written into a rider. And a rider is separate, which is in the General Appropriations Act, and it allows certain funding to go to a program, but again, not necessarily written into the statute. So these are the 7 schools that were written into that rider specifically, so that's why they're the only ones that receive funding. But what we found is the rider does not have a lot of information for administration. So we thought it would be a good idea to create some program guidelines to kind of assist the institutions that participate so that they have that. And so about a week ago, we finally were able to publish those. And if you go to our Student Financial Aid Program's website and you navigate to program resources, and then under our work study and scholarship page, you'll see now that we have bilingual education guidelines and then all the resources related to that. So you will be able to find those there. And then further down the line in the year, we'll be sending out some reporting requirements, which, again, if you're a school that already participates, you're probably aware of these things. But if you're new, or if you've never heard of this program and you work for one of these schools, it's good to know that this is yet another financial aid program that students can access. So this is a picture of what the guidelines look like. Again, they're for 2021 and they just came out. So I encourage everyone to go out and read those. Okay. So I'm going to stop here and just check in with Vanessa. Vanessa, I couldn't hear you, but let me do something real quick, and let me turn up my speaker, because like I told you a minute ago, I had turned it down to reduce feedback. So Vanessa, are you there?
Can you hear me?
I can. I'm so sorry, because like I said, I turned my speakers down, and so that was totally my fault.
No. Oh, that's funny. Okay, well, I successfully logged off, shut down my computer just in case, and made it back just on time.
Well, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll kind of move forward with the guidelines.
Wonderful. So my name is Vanessa Malol, and I am the program director at the coordinating board within the College Readiness and Success Division for College Success Programs. And one of those programs is the Work Study Mentorship Program. And the other program is a new program that's launching this year called Texas Works. It's an internship program. So happy to be here, and excited to be able to answer any questions you may have and go through some of the minor but new items here in the guidelines for this year.
Great. Thank you, Vanessa. And again, because of the way that I'm running this webcast, I will warn you that depending on how this is being recorded, it may have some feedback for any of those on the call. So
okay,
if that makes any sense at all. It's basically mine is recording your voice through my speaker, so I have no idea, but we will see. Okay. But so for the last few years, the financial aid services area and then college readiness and success in Vanessa's area has been working on a collaborative effort on these program guidelines. So they've been around for a long time, but we've tried to work together because a lot of the concepts in these guidelines overlap departments. So some of the people on the call may actually be program directors of mentorship, while others are financial aid. We may even have registrars. We have just different people who tend to join this webcast. So keep that in mind, that some of these things that I'm going to be talking about, they may not directly relate to your area, but it's just, again, knowledge so that you can go back to your colleagues and have these discussions so that you understand the program better. So first and foremost, on the Student Financial Aid Programs webpage, we have posted the new updated guidelines, I should say, under our webpage, which again, program resources and then work study and scholarship section. You'll see a new copy of the 2021 guidelines there. But you'll also be able to find a copy of the guidelines on the webpage that Vanessa oversees, which is specifically related to the work study mentorship program for program directors. So you'll see that as well on that page. So it's in two different places. We figure the more places to access, the better. But they are the same copy. And again, this is what they look like. So in today's discussion, I'm going to be just highlighting some of the changes that were made in the guidelines so that you're not hunting down every single word or comma that was changed. Because really, these go through a very thorough review, but I want to just focus on the higher level things. And then Vanessa's going to chime in using her expertise so she can clarify a few items. So let's get started. So first and foremost, within the program guidelines, we highlighted the fact that the work study mentorship program rules are going to be moved into the actual Texas College work study rules. And the reason is because work study mentorship is a subset of that program. All the funding that is received for work study is divvied up between the programs. And so they felt that it was more logical to put the mentorship rules under Texas College Work Study. So as of yesterday, when I checked, they are still located under Chapter 4, Subchapter J of the Title 19 under the Texas Administrative Code, but at some point they are going to be moving. So there's a note in the guidelines just to point that out because, we just don't know when the update to the website is going to happen. So we didn't want people to be confused when they're used to going one place and then it moves or vice versa. So keep an eye out for that. The next thing is within the institution requirements, the sample MOU has been updated. I'm going to pull up a picture of that, but I'll let Vanessa just briefly explain what you can expect to see on there.
Okay, so every year we always review the MOU. For those that aren't familiar with what this is, Work Study Mentorship Program has the opportunity to have an on-campus component and an off-campus component. So if you have an off-campus program and you're working with high school students within the school districts or nonprofit organizations, you have to have an agreement with your partners, which basically says it's okay for our students to work within your facilities, and it goes through the roles and responsibilities of both parties, what the school district will provide and what the institution will provide. So each year we have our legal staff actually review just to provide guidance as to what are some of the important things that we would recommend for you to put in here. Now, at the end of the day, you always refer to your legal counsel because everything's going to be a little bit different, but this is just a template. It's just an example. What I will tell you that is significant here and that has been added is that there is a section about matching. So work study mentorship program institutions provide a 10% match towards earned wages of their employed students. And so those partners that they're working with also will be contributing a form of match. It can be through in-kind or cash, dependent upon one very important factor. If you are waived from that match. So if you are waived from the 10% match, then that actually waives you from all types of matches pertaining to this program. So that's very important. So if you could just take a look at the sample MOU, if you have an off-campus program, double check and see if you're eligible for that waiver, which is provided by financial aid, which waives you from the 10% match. If you are waived, then you don't have to worry about that section. You just have to provide that to THECB. If you do not have a waiver, then you do want to pay attention to this section and make sure it's documented in your future MOUs.
Great, thank you, Vanessa. And she's also we have a section on matching, so we can kind of show you some of the updated language too that may be helpful. Okay, so moving on. Also, part of the guidelines that was added this year was just some clarification that there are certain concepts and rules that exist for the program that again overlap departments. So some of these things are going to be determined by financial aid and overseen by financial aid, and then others are directly tied to the program director that deals with the reporting and the funding and all of that. So I'm just going to briefly touch on these, but a lot of times I think that because it exists in financial aid, people say, oh my gosh, I don't know what that concept is, and that's okay. So this is a way to work together so that if you see something that you're not familiar with, that you reach out to either financial aid or another partner at your school so that you can make sure that you're administering the program based on the rules. So the first one in this list is state priority deadline. State priority deadline is written into statute, and what it means is that there are certain schools which are defined as general academic teaching institutions, which primarily are the four-year public schools. That does include Lamar State Orange and Lamar State Port Arthur. But if you're what they call a Gaddy's school, you are required to publish a state priority deadline in which students get priority on funding. So that doesn't mean that they're guaranteed anything. It just means that if you have two similarly situated students, that the institution can then provide funding to the student that applied before that deadline. So again, financial aid offices are very familiar with state priority deadline. Even schools that are not Gaddies tend to use a state priority deadline, even though they're not required to. It just helps because there isn't unlimited funding. It just helps prioritize that funding, or not the funding, but the ability for students to receive that funding. The second item here is selective service. So financial aid offices typically confirm selective service through the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, and then some students complete the Texas application for state financial aid, or TASFA. So this year in the guidelines, we released some new updates to this requirement. It's been an ongoing conversation for a few years now on, just exactly how schools can go about confirming whether a student is in fact registered with selective service or if they are exempt. So we created this little section within the guidelines now that outlines the different scenarios so that you can make sure that you're checking their status. So we did release back in April the following guidance of when a statement is not needed. If financial aid office is able to confirm the student is registered by going online through selective service, they have a dedicated website. If they can go on there and confirm that, they don't need to collect any additional documentation or forms. We also were able to confirm that if a student completes a FAFSA but they're under the age of 18, they don't need to collect anything because they're exempt, and the record that is submitted to the school would include verbiage that says that they're exempt. So again, very technical. I will leave it at that. Financial aid office is very familiar again with this process and how to confirm whether the student is eligible or not. We also included a section that talks about when the statement is required. So if a student completes a TASFA, the form itself that they have to fill out has been embedded in the document. And so therefore it is a requirement, but because it's now included in the actual application, it's one less thing for the student to have to fill out and submit. It's just all in one. And then if the student does not complete a FAFSA or a TASFA, but they apply for financial aid, either, for example, like an exemption or waiver program, which we'll touch on in a minute, they cannot be confirmed on the Selective Service website, then an actual statement has to be collected from these students. And so one of the new things in all of the guidelines that was created this year was a fillable form that institutions can use to make it easier on the student to complete their statement. So we have it in both English and Spanish. They're located on our website, on the Student Financial Aid Programs website. We did not place them on College for All Texans because, again, they're for the institution to distribute. We didn't want students to necessarily get confused and download it, and it was unnecessary. But on this form, they can indicate their status, and then it directs them exactly what they need to do and how they submit the form. So, and it does include an e-signature and a way to tell them where to submit the form. And that's on the online version. The other things in the mentorship guidelines that were added this year, again, financial aid related, were award adjustments and over awards. These are written into our general provisions for the programs, which is kind of like the overarching rules for all programs. So again, you would want to work with financial aid to determine if an award adjustment would be needed, and that's typically if a student becomes ineligible or if there was some kind of miscalculation done. And then over awards if there's kind of a threshold that if the student, their assistance exceeds their financial need, there's a $300 kind of threshold there where they don't have to adjust the award. So again, this would be, as you're managing the program and evaluating the awards, you'll want to make sure that you're in compliance, but I would work with financial aid to determine if they're meeting these eligibility standards. Okay, and then lastly, next we were talking about required matching. Vanessa hit on this a minute ago, but I'll let her explain this again because she touched on each of these pieces, but more specifically about this new alert and why it matters.
Okay, good afternoon again here. So this is what I explained to you within the MOU, what's been added to the MOU template. So we put a section here specific to it to help explain how it works. So it says school district and nonprofit partners must contribute matching funds, either cash or in kind, that's at least equal to the amount of the institution's contribution. So the institution's contribution is that 10% of earned wages requirement that everyone has been working on. And so this amount is determined within the MOU. So that's something that you arrange with the partners you're working with. Again, this is very specific to if you're working with school districts or nonprofit partners and you have an MOU with them. But I want to emphasize where it says important. School district and nonprofit partners are exempt from the matching requirements if the participating institution is exempt from that 10% match of employed student wages. So that's really it. Everything else remains the same that we've been doing.
Great. Okay, and the last piece of the updates in the guidelines were related to reporting and then the templates. The dates for the reporting periods and the due dates have been updated, so you'll want to take a look at that. And then the available forms in the appendix include copies of the templates, and I'll let Vanessa explain those, but just wanted to point out that they are embedded on the last page so that if you don't, the most recent copy of these templates is always going to be in the guidelines, or you can reach out to Vanessa directly, but just wanted to point that out that they're located at the back of the document.
Yes. So just very quickly, each year we, of course, are living and learning from you. So we have worked on simplifying the reporting templates as much as possible throughout the years. For the upcoming year and even the current report that was due on June 5th, the financial report will look the same. What we've done is we've combined the matching with the expenditure, so it's all on one spreadsheet this time around. One of the things I want to point out is that it has a section where it says what your matching amount should be, so it pre-calculates it for you so you can see what it should be. So again, if you have a waiver letter that's already been submitted, then of course that's something that, although it's calculating, you disregard it. But if you don't have a waiver letter submitted, then that's a number that you should have met. The certification statement addresses either or. So when you read that statement, it covers both whether you have a waiver or you don't have a waiver. But it's simply there to help you kind of see where your numbers need to be at. So it also includes the transfer amount, the opportunity that Leah talked about, where if a work-study mentorship program due to COVID does not have use of the funds currently, those funds can be transferred. And so there's a section on there that if you're a project director, you can actually type in there that amount that was transferred. So again, the financial report is a tool for you to be able to keep track of how much you're spending and what your available amounts are. So it's for your own record and retentions, but in addition to allow us to be able to see how you've been progressing over time. And very quickly, the data report template has changed quite a bit in this capacity. Prior to this year, you have been writing descriptions of the types of activities you're implementing. This coming September 5th, I'm going to send you the same template, but for this year period. But you can see a preview of it in here. You're going to see that there's a list of broad categories of types of activities you have been implementing over the years. So your goal is simply to tell us the type of activities by putting X next to the choice. And if something that you've been doing is not listed, then you'll simply write that out for us. And then that allows us to get a good picture of how you're structuring your program and how you're doing things. The persistence data, all of that remains the same. So that is what's coming down. We have, just real quick, we are also designing an online reporting portal. And so I'll be keeping you posted on when that actually will be launching, but someday you will be able to submit all of this electronically, and we're going to continue to do what we can to simplify everything.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I just wanted to point out something for everyone on the phone that deals with mentorship. Keep in mind, Vanessa is just one person, and I've been so impressed about how well she does overseeing such a large program. You know, it's not easy because she has other tasks and functions in her day-to-day world. So, you know, I commend you, Vanessa. I know that it's a lot of moving parts, and I know that you have a lot of people in the field that you work with closely. So I hope that y'all can continue to collaborate, and you've done a great job of kind of streamlining this process and getting up to speed when it kind of got handed to you a few years back. So, you know I appreciate you. I hope everyone at the school can see the value in all the stuff that you've done and these great guidelines. So just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Leah. It's definitely been a team effort by everybody. I know we can't all speak because there's so many of us here, but I'm sure there's
Vanessa, whoever
yes.
who's put together the forms, so that's why they're still just on here.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. If you have a comment or question, feel free to type it in the chat box so that we can minimize the background. I know I heard someone, so whoever you are out there, we were definitely interested in what you're saying. So feel free to type it in the chat box so we can address whatever comment or question you have.
Thank you, Leah. Do I have a second that I could add one more thing real quick?
Of course.
Before, since everybody's here. So again, thank you for the kind words, and thank you to all of you for working so hard on this program. Real quick, something that I think will be helpful. On the financial report, at the bottom, there are some totals there. There's a total for earned wages from September 19 through May 2020, and then there's a total for earned wages plus the 10% match. So again, if you have a waiver, the total you're referring to is the earned wages only. If you don't have a waiver letter, then you're referring to the total earned wages plus the match. So for financial aid directors who are submitting into the financial aid database system and program directors that are not, working in financial aid, if you don't have a waiver letter, that's the total you're referring to, that match plus earned wages, to submit into the financial aid database. So again, I'm always here for help and questions. You can reach out to me at any point in time. Thank you.
Great. And if you do have questions, I'm about done with the presentation, so feel free to start typing those questions so that we can circle back in just a moment. But moving on from work study mentorship, again, I went through where you can find those guidelines, and of course, I'll have Vanessa's email at the end where if you need to reach out to her, you can have that available to you in just a moment. But moving forward, wanted to let everybody know about a new fact sheet that we created a few weeks ago. It was after the last webcast, but I wanted to make sure and mention it. But if you go onto student financial aid programs, program resources, and then click on exemption and waivers, down towards the bottom, there's a foster care exemption fact sheet. Now, a fact sheet differs from a guidelines because guidelines has a whole variety of different sections that we include to help administer this program and determine eligibility. And the difference between foster care and some of these other programs is that institutions don't do a lot of determination for this program. And so we thought it better to create something short and sweet so that you know kind of what your role is in this program. Again, if you're in financial aid, you may be working with the registrar's office and then potentially a foster care liaison that is assigned to your school. So it really depends on, how your school is structured. But we wanted to make sure to get this out to the institution so that you can use it kind of as a cheat sheet, something quick to reference. And so you know that there are certain things that you do need to check, and then others that are the responsibility of another agency. So with foster care, the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services is the one that actually determines and issues out the verification form for this program. So if a student were to come to your school and bring this form with them, then all you would need to do is go through the necessary kind of enrollment and the selective service that we talked about. There's certain minimums that they have to meet, but outside of that, if they're issued that form, then DFPS has already done the legwork to determine if they in fact met all the statutory and rule requirements for this program. So if you receive that form and it is current and they meet everything else, then you can safely assume that they should be issued an exemption of tuition. So, I won't go into every line of this, but again, we broke it down so that the left half of the fact sheet kind of goes through general eligibility determination, talks about eligible courses that can be exempted from tuition, which is primarily those that receive formula funding, including dual credit courses. And then it goes through enrollment eligibility, transfer eligibility, and all of the associated things about award amount. And you'll notice at the bottom, we included resources to the laws and the rules associated with these programs. So another thing to point out with this foster care exemption fact sheet is that there are two programs. There's a program for students who were in foster care and potentially aged out. And then there's a program in which a foster care individual was adopted out of foster care and may qualify. So there are subtle differences between those, and that's why we kind of wove in those requirements into the fact sheet. So keep that in mind, that's why there's two different statutes listed, because we felt that the programs were so similar that we could include them into one resource, but there are just tiny little differences between the two. And then on the right-hand side of the form, you have understand the facts and then understand the process. Again, high-level things to be aware of, because foster care and the adoption program are not subject to some of the other requirements that exemption and waivers are restricted to. For example, students who receive an exemption or waiver have to meet certain GPA requirements. Well, for foster care, that does not apply. And so we put that in here to make sure that schools know that a student, even though they're not meeting your institution's GPA requirement, they can still receive that benefit. That was something that was passed in the law several years back. Also with the excessive hours restriction, they are also not bound to that as well. So again, the fact sheet just tries to break down, here's kind of what you need to know, and then here's the process that you should be following. So it goes under, the student is admitted to your school, They're going to request the form from DFPS. Once you get that form, you're going to confirm all of the eligibility pieces on the left-hand side, and then you verify that they meet enrollment requirements through your admissions group. And then each year, they don't need to resubmit that form. Once they qualify, that should be sufficient. The only time that they would need a different form is if they transfer from one institution to another. It's our understanding that the DFPS agency issues out a different letter for each school. We've put it out there to them that they should just issue one to lessen the burden on the student, but that's their decision. So we'll see what comes in the future. But so really, that's it with the fact sheet. I will let you know that we're working on other fact sheets because we feel like they're nice little quick. Again, I'll call them almost a cheat sheet, fact/cheat sheet. But I even use this one now when we get inquiries just to reference, because it's a nice quick way to just look up something, and it also has the resources embedded in the hyperlinks. So again, it is on our webpage. Please use it. This is not intended for students. Not that you couldn't give it to a student, but it may confuse them more than help. There's a lot of resources for foster care students online through the different agencies that assist them, including they usually have representatives and liaisons either at their high school or even at the schools that they can work with to kind of navigate through the process. So I highly encourage that you can steer them that direction versus using something like this. This is, you'll notice at the bottom it says institutional resource, and we wanted to make sure to highlight that because it really is just intended for y'all at the schools. If you have questions on the foster care, you can start typing those now. I'm just moving on to this last slide about resources, which is our educational aid exemption program. We always have a lot of inquiries on it, even though it's a smaller program. The educational aid application was just published yesterday. It's available both on College for All Texans under the educational aid program page. And then if you go to student financial aid programs for the institution, we also posted it there. The application has not changed this year. There's very subtle wording changes. Most notably at the top, we just specified that the student does have to submit an application each term. They don't just check all 3 boxes and then it's good for the whole time. And the reason for that is because with the educational aid exemption, the school has to confirm employment for the entire term. So they have to do that each time they award the student. So in order to do that, you need a new application to kind of confirm that quarter or term. So that's the really only thing that we saw on there. I do recall a change on the second page. If you're familiar with educational aid, there used to be a spot that said calculated need, and it talked about cost of attendance minus EFC, and then it included minus Pell, and that is incorrect. So we did modify that because the definition for demonstrating financial need for this program is cost of attendance minus their EFC. So that was a little bit misleading and incorrect. So we did get that updated this year. So the application's online. Feel free to distribute that not only to your students, but if you work with any school districts or partners in the community, you can issue that out. And then just as a reminder, the students do submit those to the institutions, not to the coordinating board, even though we release the application. We also updated this year our frequently asked questions, and these have been around for many years, but each year we go through it to see if there's anything that's changed in the rule or something that we can do better on and clarify. And so luckily there's not a lot of changes this year. I think there was some subtle wording changes. And then I think we added a couple definitions. So again, not huge changes, but definitely take a look and make sure that you read through them, because I do feel like they answer questions that are not readily available in the program guidelines that we released a few weeks or months back. So we also have a student edition, which this can be distributed to students if you choose to, as kind of like if you're interested in this program, you can issue out the application or email this out to them. It answers a lot of the questions that a student may have, or even someone who's not a student, they're just inquiring with your financial aid office saying, hey, I read about this program, like, what do I need to do? You can email this out, and it is very, very similar to the institution edition, but there are differences that we tried to make more relatable to the student versus the school. So you'd have to do a comparison to see those differences, but again, we did the two different copies so that you could release one to the student as a resource. So that is it. We do have more resources coming. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be doing online loan training. We've got FADs coming up. There's just a variety of things on the horizon. So I encourage you, again, if you need training or you have topics, I'm going to go to my next slide, which is the contact me page. So here's my email with my updated domain name. So if you need to email me, you can do leah.smalley@highered.texas.gov. Vanessa's email is vanessa.malo@highered.texas.gov. Please only email her for work study mentorship program, or if you have Texas Works program questions or something related to what she discussed today. I also have a webcast survey. I mentioned this last year and wanted to revisit that. This is a way for you to, one, tell me how I'm doing on these webcasts, and two, it allows you to submit topic ideas so that we can look at those. And I do use them. I've gotten a few topics now from those feedback comments that were submitted. And so I really, really appreciate if you take, 10 seconds to fill it out. It's not long. And then lastly on here is using the contact us that I talked about. As much as I love when y'all email me, and trust me, I don't mind if you email me, if you have a question regarding a program or eligibility or funding, it's really better to use the contact us, because I'm in and out of the office just like everyone else, and I would hate to miss an email from you that needs to be routed on urgently or that someone else can answer. So if you have something specific to training or you have feedback or anything like that, absolutely reach out to me. Otherwise, try and utilize the contact us so that we can make sure that that's done timely. And with that, I will move on to questions. Hopefully everyone's been frantically typing lots and lots of questions, or I have no questions because I answered everything during the webcast, but I have it up on my screen. Let me revisit this. Okay, let me see. Oh my goodness, there's lots here, which is great. Great. I'm not complaining. Okay. So, and Vanessa, hopefully you're still there. I have a few up here. So it says on the MOU, if we've incorporated information about this program into an MOU, can we submit that, or do we have to create a new MOU specific for work study mentorship using the sample as a guideline?
Yes, so I provided some feedback here. This is a great question. So if you have MOUs currently in place, that's fine. What you'll want to do is review the current, the one that's in the 2021 version, compare it. If there are things that need to be added, i.e. perhaps the matching section, if that is your situation, then you'll want to work on doing that. Send it to your partners to review, approval, and sign. And then once that's ready, you can submit that to me. You'll upload it to the Move It system, or you email it to me.
Great. And I see your response in the chat box, and it's good that we got it, recorded as well, so that if for some reason you can't see the chat box, you got the response as well. So Aurora asked, what is selective service for? And then Deshay answered that. Hopefully there's some ongoing questions about selective service, but just to reiterate what Deshay was saying, financial aid programs in the state of Texas require that male students be registered with the military for selective service, or that they be exempt. So there are conditions in which a male student may be exempt from registering. Again, financial aid should be familiar with all the different scenarios and what the procedure is to document whether they're registered or not. So definitely work with them so that you can make sure that if you're issuing out mentorship funding, that the student is in fact eligible. Let's see. Diana It says, if a TASFA student is under 18 years of age, are they eligible to receive state financial aid while they're waiting for the student's proof of registration with Selective Service? So if the student is under the age of 18, they will complete the statement embedded on the TASFA to indicate that they're under the age and therefore they're exempt. And that will be eligible for the entire award year until the following year. They would have to mark that they were either registered or exempt, and they would have to have the paperwork from Selective Service. So if on the day they sign their application, they're under the age of 18, they don't need any documentation. They just have to mark the box. And then if you have an internal process at your institution to confirm, date of birth, you can do that. But that's a totally institutional decision. I hope that answered your question. Let's see. Norma said, I noticed on the guidelines it indicates student workers can work up to 20 hours a week, but when we asked for confirmation, we were informed that it was 19 hours, no exceptions. Can you please clarify if it's 19 hours a week or 20? And then I don't know if someone answered that one.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
This is Vanessa.
There's lots of conversations going on here.
Yes, we're having great conversations here. And I apologize to those of you who have a couple of other questions and I haven't gotten to yet. So for this particular question, this is based on institutional policy at the end of the day. It's what's allowed. Most institutions only allow up to 19 hours a week of work. The program says that it's okay that you can work up to 20 hours a week. So you'll just want to lean on your institutional policy and see if they would allow that extra hour.
Great. There is another question about matching. It says, good afternoon. Can you go into more detail about the school district needing to match 10%? Are these funds paid to the institution or are they paid to the coordinating board? No.
Yes, so that's actually will work just like your institutional match. So you match it, so it's coming from your institutional funds. It's going to be the same thing for your partners. Your partners are going to match it from their funds to your institution.
Yep. Okay. So I'm just kind of sifting through. Most of these have been answered, if not all of them, based on just scrolling. Let's see. There's one about foster care. What was the other one? There's one asking about allocations. Allocations are in the final approval stage, so unfortunately I don't have any updates on that at this time, but stay tuned. My favorite, stay tuned. And then, let's see, Irma, you indicated that the Department of Human Services issues eligibility letters regarding foster care, but they issue that to the student, not the institution. Has that changed? No, so the student would apply through the foster care program through the department, and then they issue the student the letter, and then they would bring that to the school. So that should not have changed. Let's see.
Leah, there's a question about carry forward funds. So very quickly, yes, 1920 funds that you have left over come August 2020 for mentorship program can be carried forward into 2021. And of course, you have to expend your carry forward by August 2021.
Perfect. Somebody requested the survey link. I just pasted it into the chat box. I know you're all excited to fill it out, so please do that. I think we got, to be honest, there's so many. This is the first time I've ever had this many questions, but luckily between Deshay and Vanessa, it looks like they've been able to answer all the questions. Since we're about out of time, I want to make sure that you do get your questions answered. So please submit those through Contact Us if it did not get answered in this chat box, or if I didn't answer it, because again, there's a lot of them in here and I want to make sure that we don't go over on time. So if you submitted something, we didn't answer it, go ahead and submit that to us today or sometime this week so that we can revisit that and get back to you in writing. And otherwise, I really wanted to just say thank you. And, I'll be back in July. We'll have a whole new list of topics, and I hope that this was a valuable day for y'all. This will be recorded and posted through YouTube on our website, so it's usually about a week out, and I'll send an announcement out once it's available online. And you'll get the link the same place that you got the Join Us. It'll be there. So thank you so much. I hope everyone has a great week. Stay cool out there. It's starting to heat up. And, thank you so much for everything you do. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.